Next on Special Report, police and demonstrators clash in the streets of Argentina as President Bush and Latin American leaders gather to talk about free trade. Reporters asked the president if he'll apologize for the actions of Karl Rove and Scooter Libby. We'll tell you what he said. Back home, Senate Democrats turn up the heat on pre-war intelligence. Republicans call it showboating. And a top British general in Iraq says Iran is helping the insurgents. All that and our all-star panel after headlines from New York.
Everyone, I'm Gretchen Carlson. Anti-American protesters in Argentina taking out their anger for President Bush on their own town. They're burning a bank and shattering store windows outside the Summit of the Americas, where Mr. Bush is meeting with 33 other world leaders. The meeting is focusing on issues like jobs and poverty, but the protesters oppose the president's free trade policies. So far, 60 people under arrest. France on fire. Arson attacks spreading beyond the Paris suburbs as rioting there enters its 9th night. Gangs of teens torching buildings and hundreds of cars in the worst unrest France has seen in a decade. The chaos started after 2 teens were electrocuted in a power station while hiding from police. Wen-Ho Lee wins a legal victory, an appeals court refusing to hear an appeal by journalists who've been ordered to testify in a lawsuit brought by the nuclear scientist. Lee was suspected of spying while he worked at the Los Alamos lab in New Mexico. He's suing the government, claiming the reporters were given private information about him. And Britain's Prince Charles and wife Camilla visiting victims of Hurricane Katrina, the royal couple getting a first-hand look at New Orleans' lower 9th Ward, the area hardest hit by the flooding. This is Charles and Camilla's first trip to the States since they got married back in April. The next news break is at the bottom of the hour. Special Report starts right now. Jim Engel is in tonight for Brit Hume. You're watching Fox. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Jim Engel in for Brit Hume. President Bush is meeting with fellow heads of state in Argentina as part of a 4-day trip to South America where he plans to push for a new free trade agreement. That sparked violent protests today. Riot police used tear gas to turn back thousands of protesters who filled the streets, breaking windows, setting fires, and throwing rocks at security forces. Some protesters said their rage was directed against the president. But American reporters wanted to talk about home, pressing the president on whether he intends to fire Karl Rove or thinks he needs to apologize for the actions of Rove and Scooter Libby. Fox News Chief White House correspondent Carl Cameron reports.
President Bush was 5,500 miles away from Washington in Mar del Plata, Argentina for the Summit of the Americas. But rather than Latin American relations or his free trade agenda, reporters zeroed in on the CIA leaks case and the role of top political advisor Karl Rove.
The investigation on Karl, as you know, is not complete. And therefore, I will not comment about him and or the investigation.
The White House viewed this 4-day, 3-nation South American trip as a chance for the president, whose poll numbers are at an all-time low, to rise above the daily fray of investigations and partisanship in Washington. He received and ignored a question about whether he thinks he owes the public an apology for the leaks case, but on the subject of his new Supreme Court nominee, said he is disappointed that the Senate chose not to hold hearings this year as Mr. Bush requested.
Sam Alito Jr. is an incredibly intelligent, well-qualified person who should be on the court. I told the leadership I thought it would be best to have the hearings before Christmas. They didn't feel like they could get the job done.
An estimated 10,000 protesters filled the streets. They vandalized stores and businesses, clashed with security forces, and hurled rocks and Molotov cocktails. The nearly 8,000 riot police responded with tear gas, fire hoses, and arrests.
Everyone here is against Bush because we don't like Bush.
Inside the security perimeter, after a meeting with his Argentine counterpart, Mr. Bush was self-effacing about the anti-U.S. sentiment.
This is an opportunity to positively affirm our belief in democracy and human rights and human dignity. And so I want to thank you for being a good host. It's not easy to host all these countries, particularly not easy to host perhaps me.
Headlining the demonstrations against Mr. Bush and the free trade he says will lead to better education, health care, and democracy in a region where 220 million live in poverty, Venezuela's Hugo Chavez. An ally of Cuba's Castro, Chavez accuses the U.S. of trying to kill or overthrow him to seize Venezuela's oil. In a 2-hour speech, he vowed to bury the trade deal, saying it will enslave the poor to big U.S. corporations.
Don't get too close to Mr. Bush. He's bad luck.
But 28 of the other 33 nations have agreed to resume talks on the president's Free Trade Area of the Americas initiative. It would create the world's largest free trade zone from Alaska to the tip of South America. Mr. Bush sought to minimize what Chavez had hoped would be a showdown.
Well, I will, of course, be polite. That's what the American people expect their president to do, is to be a polite person. And I will, you know, if I run across him, I will do just that.
So far, the two haven't been seen so much as even acknowledging one another. The protests have subsided now as darkness has fallen here. The summit runs through tomorrow afternoon. Then the president heads on to Brazil and Panama before returning to Washington Monday night. Jim.
Thanks, Carl, and stay off the streets. Senate Democrats today continued a full-court press in hopes of keeping the spotlight on an investigation into whether the administration exaggerated intelligence to make its case for war in Iraq. But Republicans say members from both parties said the same thing because everyone was looking at the same intelligence, which proved to be wrong. Fox News correspondent Major Garrett has more.
Senate Democrats turning up the heat on a long-stalled Intelligence Committee investigation into whether the Bush White House distorted intelligence before the Iraq War.
We are finally now going to dig into the serious issues of how this administration used or misused intelligence in making the case for going to war.
The Intelligence Committee Chairman Pat Roberts of Kansas accused Democrats of showboating. I understand the minority has held yet another press conference today, Roberts said in a statement. If they would work so hard on getting Phase 2 completed, we might be done by now. Phase 2, an investigation into whether pre-war intelligence on Iraq's possession of or pursuit of weapons of mass destruction was exaggerated, either by officials in the Bush and Clinton administrations or congressional Democrats or Republicans.
Let's get Phase 2 done. Let's make it public and available to the American people so they can say, all right, who said what and was it justified by intelligence?
Roberts accuses Democrats of refusing to scrutinize Democratic pre-war statements. Democrats deny that charge, adding that no matter what Democrats said, the buck stops with the president.
But the case for war was made by the White House. It wasn't made by the Congress. It wasn't made by senators. It wasn't made by congressmen. It was made by the White House.
The Bush White House argues it can't be fairly accused of hyping the Iraq threat when Democrats like John Kerry reach similarly ominous conclusions.
Iraq has some lethal and incapacitating agents and is capable of quickly producing, weaponizing a variety of such agents, including anthrax, for delivery on a range of vehicles, such as bombs, missiles, aerial sprayers, and covert operatives, which could bring them to the United States itself.
But Democrats say the White House knew more.
People say, well, you know, you all had the same intelligence that the White House had, and I'm here to tell you that is nowhere near the truth.
Democrats also accuse President Bush and Vice President Cheney of sifting intelligence, keeping what they agreed with, discarding the rest.
The different intelligence sources had different views, and yet how those views were reconciled was obviously faulty, because the view that came through as the definitive judgment was the false view. I want to know why that happened.
Republicans counter that differences arose only over Saddam Hussein's nuclear ambitions, not the threat of biological or chemical weapons. Other intelligence agencies, Republicans say, reached similar, if erroneous, conclusions.
It was not only wrong in the United States, it was wrong in Great Britain, it was wrong in Israel, it was wrong in even the French and the Russians had the same information.
There is no deadline to complete Phase 2, and there's no uniform standard to decide if a pre-war Iraq statement matched the underlying intelligence. A senior committee staffer said lawmakers will have to reach their own, quote, inherently subjective conclusions. Jim?
Major, thanks very much. The economy seems to have weathered the hurricanes with minimal damage. The unemployment rate in October actually dipped 0.1% to 5% as 56,000 new jobs were created. The Department of Labor also revised its job figures for September, saying only 8,000 jobs were lost instead of the 35,000 originally reported. Next on Special Report, a top British general says Iraqi insurgents are getting help from Iran. Next.
cool.
The all-new 7-passenger Jeep Commander with available command view skylights. It's your world. Take command.
You have a prototype, they have a prototype. You have overseas suppliers, they have overseas suppliers. You have low-cost manufacturing, they have low-cost manufacturing. You have packaging, they have packaging. You have an ad agency, they have an ad agency. You have a supply chain that flies through customs, bypasses warehouses, and gets your product on the shelves faster. They have a new ad agency.
What would you ask an oil company?
What is being done to make us less reliant on oil? That's a question. If we're going to keep our dependency on oil primarily for the coming years, the initial future years, where's it coming from?
Verizon Wireless Network. It's more than phone calls.
It's pictures, music, video, internet.
On the go, anytime. More than 50,000 people make this happen. People who are highly trained,
knowledge hungry,
and never satisfied with good enough.
But the best part of being Verizon Wireless,
I don't just look forward to the future.
I build it. I build it.
I build it. We build it. Our people, our network.
A senior British general says his forces in Basra are facing increasingly powerful roadside bombs, and he says he has evidence that Iraqi insurgents are getting some critical help. Fox News Pentagon correspondent Brett Baer reports.
The border between Iraq and Iran stretches more than 900 miles. Today, the top British commander responsible for southeastern Iraq said he has solid evidence the most powerful and sophisticated improvised explosive devices in Iraq are being funneled across that border from Iran.
The IED explosions, particularly the advanced technology ones, we believe the technology certainly is coming from across that border.
U.S. commanders say the number and the sophistication of IEDs has increased countrywide in recent weeks. Another U.S. soldier was killed today by a roadside bomb while on patrol in Baghdad. While terrorists have a large stockpile of explosives to pull from to make IEDs in Iraq, General Dutton said shaped charges using more powerful explosives are now being deployed by the enemy.
You imagine a cylinder of varying diameter with the length slightly more than the diameter sitting on a stand full of explosives with either a copper or a steel shaped plate on the front which when detonated produces a slug of hot copper which then penetrates armor protection on vehicles.
Iranian officials call the allegations wild and unfounded, insisting instability in Iraq is not in Iran's interest. An Iranian diplomat in Iraq said this week, quote, Iran has a policy that encourages helping neighboring countries mature politically, and this applies to our brother country, Iraq. After repeating that it is happening, General Dutton could not say who's behind the explosives transfer.
I simply don't know whether this is Iranian government policy or whether this is simply groups who are using Iran for their own purposes and not being controlled.
Dutton conceded that the long, porous border is difficult to police, and despite stepped-up efforts, there hasn't been much success at stopping the flow of explosives. General Dutton said while there are sporadic attacks, overall security in southeastern Iraq has improved greatly, and the handover to Iraqi security forces is almost complete there. Dutton said Iraqi police are now in the lead, and when the police need help, they call the Iraqi army, not British troops. Jim?
Brett, thanks. By a voice vote, the Senate added language to a defense bill that would prohibit cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment of military detainees. The amendment, sponsored by Arizona Republican John McCain, is identical to a provision added to the Defense Appropriations Bill by a vote of 90-9 last month. President Bush has threatened to veto the entire spending bill over the provision, but McCain says he'll continue to add the amendment to every piece of important legislation until it's signed into law. It's a case of revolving judges in the trial of Texas Representative Tom DeLay. Days after DeLay successfully got a Democratic judge removed from the case, the Republican charged with selecting his replacement recused himself, and the whole thing was handed off to yet another judge. Confused? Fox News correspondent Greg Kelly has the latest.
How you doing, sir? Indicted Republican Congressman Tom DeLay is eager for his day in court.
I am innocent, and Mr. Earl knows it.
And the Democratic prosecutor, Ronnie Earl, wants to prosecute.
Our job is to prosecute abuses of power.
But getting this case to trial has turned Texas judicial circles inside out. The challenge, finding a judge with no ties to DeLay or to partisan causes, Democratic or Republican. In Texas, that's hard, because the state is one of only a handful in the country where all judges are elected in partisan contests. Competitive political elections mean raising cash, and it's the money trail that pushed two potential judges in the DeLay case out this week, and questions are being raised about two others. The first judge, Bob Perkins, was removed because of perceived bias. He contributed money to the liberal MoveOn.org. Perkins's boss, B.B. Schraub, then went about finding a replacement, but he soon recused himself after questions were raised about his ties to Republicans. He gave $2,000 to the campaign of George W. Bush. Schraub then referred the matter to the top judge in Texas, the Supreme Court Chief Justice Wallace Jefferson. But Justice Jefferson received money from a branch of the Republican National Committee at the very heart of the criminal case against DeLay. Still, over objections from Democrats, Jefferson appointed a retired San Antonio judge, Pat Priest, to the case. Judge Priest has given money to Democratic state candidates, but for now, his appointment stands. An attorney for Tom DeLay says their side is ready to move forward.
It's Judge Priest, and yes, he has a reputation of being a fine, fair judge. We're glad to have him, and we're ready to go.
But the rotating cast of judges and the intersection of the judiciary and politics is of growing concern for Texans. Charles Silver is a professor of law at the University of Texas.
If what Mr. DeLay has pointed to is a significant problem, we ought to recognize that it's the same problem for everyone, not just for him.
Well, next, the defense will try to get this case in front of a jury with at least some Republicans on it. It's the latest legal tactic with serious political overtones. Jim?
Greg, thanks very much. Next on Special Report, a series of scandals has forced Detroit's so-called hip-hop mayor into the political fight of his life. Next.
We're always live.
This program is brought to you by American Chemistry, essential to living. Learn more at AmericanChemistry.com.
The medicines, the plastics, the materials, things that make modern life modern come from one place. Chemistry. Learn more at AmericanChemistry.com.
When you're a star like me, things are taken care of. You see? A second bag. Second.
Even my independent insurance agent spoils me.
Ryan, after comparing a number of companies, I recommend Drive Insurance from Progressive. You'll get a policy customized just for you.
How does the other half live?
Actually, I do it for everyone.
To find an agent who'll take care of you, go to driveinsurance.com.
If you've had a heart attack that reduced how well your heart pumps, hear this. Your heart medications may not be enough protection. Coreg is FDA approved to increase your chance of survival when taken over time. Adding Coreg to your current treatment can help prevent another heart attack. Coreg reduces your heart's workload to help it pump better. That should be music to your ears.
Coreg.
Coreg is not for everyone, including people prone to asthma, heart rhythm problems, slow heart rate, or liver problems. Once you start Coreg, you should continue as directed by your doctor. Patients who abruptly stop may experience chest pain or an increased risk of heart attack. In some cases, patients may experience dizziness or faintness when starting Coreg. You should avoid driving or hazardous tasks if this occurs.
See your doctor to find out if Coreg is right for you. Help protect your heart with Coreg.
I got it because I couldn't take dial-up another second.
Dial-up was so slow.
This is dial-up noise. I had it with the noise.
We all had it with the noise.
More and more people are getting it. Getting Verizon Online DSL, that is. Especially now that it's just $14.95 a month.
With DSL, it's so fast.
Like boom. I click, I'm connected.
You want to download a file, it's right there.
Finally download music like everyone else.
I don't have to worry about incoming calls.
I can be on the computer and she's on the phone.
Verizon Online DSL makes doing everything online so much easier and so much faster. And now it's at our lowest price ever, just $14.95 a month. Compare that to cable.
It costs about the same as dial-up.
It's not that expensive. It's really cheap.
It costs less than cable.
Call 1-877-287-2343 to get Verizon Online DSL. That's 1-877-287-2343 for the best value in broadband.
We got Verizon Online DSL.
And we are never going back to dial-up.
You want to go back?
No, I don't want to go back to dial-up.
4 years ago, Kwame Kilpatrick became the nation's youngest big city mayor. His youth and energy offering some hope for Detroit, a city plagued by long-standing joblessness and crime. But the city's financial woes have worsened, and the mayor's administration has been tainted by scandal. That could be a scenario for an incumbent to take a fall, or maybe not. Fox News correspondent Jeff Goldblatt reports.
His supporters want him back, but Kwame Kilpatrick is in serious jeopardy of being the first mayor of Detroit in 44 years to not win a second term.
I think there's a lot of people out there who are upset with me for one reason or another.
Scandal may be that reason, and it's dogged Kilpatrick during this campaign.
Newly released records show the mayor hit taxpayers for another $140,000 for fancy meals, football and concert tickets, even a tuxedo rental for his cousin.
How you doing, man? Former Deputy Mayor Freeman Hendricks has launched an aggressive campaign in his bid to unseat Kilpatrick. Like the mayor, he's also a Democrat, but he says that's where the similarities end.
Our politics are very different. Our ages are different. Our support bases are very different.
Early in the race, Hendricks capitalized on support from the dependable vote of senior citizens to surge to a lead of nearly 20 points in one poll. But recent polls show Kilpatrick narrowing the gap. One suggests the race is within the margin of error.
I think what the mayor has been able to do since June is to focus in on the record, why they elected him in the first place.
And Kilpatrick says what this nearly bankrupt city needs is a young mayor with a vision to modernize Detroit.
I don't even think my opponent can see that far or even understands those things. I understand how to balance budgets. I'm the person in this race who's balanced 8 straight budgets. He's the person in this race who's had straight deficit-ridden budgets.
This race has become so contentious that Michigan Secretary of State is expected to be in Detroit on Election Day, along with a staff of monitors. There are concerns about potential voting irregularities stemming from alleged discrepancies with absentee ballots.
What I try to do is hold fair elections.
Detroit's election supervisor, Jackie Curry, who's up for re-election herself, was fined by a judge in September. The reason? Curry defied the judge's order to stop sending out unsolicited absentee ballots. This controversy unfolding just as the mayor's race tightens.
We need to make sure at all costs that this election is not tainted. I'll win if it's fair. That's how I win. I win when it's fair.
To the winner goes a $300 million deficit and a city with the dubious distinction of being the nation's most impoverished. In Detroit, Jeff Goldblatt, Fox News.
Abortion is not only a big issue in Supreme Court confirmations, it's also up for a vote in California. A ballot initiative there that would force clinics to notify the parents of underage girls who seek an abortion is at issue. Supporters say the measure is just about parents' rights, but critics call it a dangerous move toward changing the national policy on abortion. Fox correspondent Trace Gallagher reports.
Vote yes on Proposition 73.
So I'm voting no on Prop 73.
Proposition 73 requires that clinics give parents 48 hours notice before performing an abortion on girls under 18. The measure does not require parental consent. And young girls facing a medical emergency or who get a judge's waiver would be exempt.
Parents are not the enemy.
Supporters like Maria Kennedy do believe that by getting parents involved, abortions would be fewer and safer. But they don't believe this issue is necessarily about abortion.
It really is about parental rights. I mean, it would be a far stretch to go from parental notification to ruling against the constitutional right on abortion.
But opponents have made that connection, calling this a step towards abolishing Roe versus Wade. They argue the law would put girls at risk, saying some girls won't confide in their parents because of fear or abuse, and that would lead them to seek out shoddy medical facilities and dangerous abortions. And the so-called bypass option of going to a judge, they call ludicrous.
I can't imagine how a 15-year-old, a scared pregnant 15-year-old, could actually figure out not only where to go, where juvenile court is, but then how do they get a lawyer? How do they maneuver the system?
Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, whose popularity continues to wane, supports 5 measures on the ballot. But Prop 73 is the only one of those that stands a decent chance of passing. The initiative, which is opposed by Planned Parenthood and the California Medical Association, is also widely expected to galvanize voters and increase what was forecast to be low voter turnout.
All we're trying to do is get families involved in their children's lives.
We feel it's best that they have access to confidential health care.
If Prop 73 passes, California would become the 35th state with a parental notification law. For now, polls show voters are fairly split on the measure. But it's interesting to note that voters who favor abortion rights also have a favorable view of the proposition. In Los Angeles, Trace Gallagher, Fox News.
We have to take a break to pay some bills and update other headlines. When we come back, the mayor of Las Vegas has a bizarre idea for law enforcement. Next on the Grapevine.
Sometimes just getting to retirement seems impossible. That's where we come in. As the nation's 401k leader, the principal offers many simple ways to plan for retirement, making it easier for you to get where you're going. The Principal Financial Group will give you an edge.
Introducing the all-new 2006 Lincoln Zephyr, Mark LT, and Navigator. Lincoln, reach higher.
Hey, down here. Filling up with Shell gasoline, right?
Yeah?
Apply now and get a Shell MasterCard, and I'd be your 15% rebate. That's 35 cents a gallon at $2.35 a gallon. Good for your first 60 days. Just imagine all the rebates.
You get 15% rebates for 60 days with the new Shell MasterCard account when you apply by January 15th, 2006. Call 1-877-MY-SHELL or stop by your nearest Shell station.
I'm not poor, but I'm sure not rich. I need my Medicare. I figure the less I spend on medical stuff, the more I can spend on my grandkids. And now there are all these new prescription drug plans to choose from. I have no idea if they're for people like me. My neighbor said I could save. My friend said I couldn't. So what's the right answer?
That depends. Call for your 10-minute Aetna answer. Find out what may make sense for you. Call Aetna Medicare at 1-800-2-ANSWER.
I heard the new Medicare drug plan start January 1st. I've also heard they could help me save. I love that. But how am I supposed to know which plan to pick? Which will save me the most money? And how long do I have to choose? If I wait too long, will I miss out? What should I do next?
Call for your 10-minute Aetna answer and find out what might be best for you. Call Aetna Medicare at 1-800-2-ANSWER. We want you to know. Aetna Medicare.
More special report in a moment, but first let's get a check on the day's other headlines and a preview of tonight's Fox Report from Shepard Smith in our New York newsroom. Shep?
Jim, if UPS can do it, why can't the feds? Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff says the government should take a page from the overnight delivery companies as it works to improve its response to emergencies. His department oversees FEMA, which was, of course, slammed for its handling of Katrina relief efforts. Chertoff says that FEMA is working on better ways to get people and supplies where they're needed when there's an emergency. An Oregon judge upholding the state's ban on same-sex marriage, gay rights supporters argued that the vote for the ban was flawed, but the judge disagreed. Last year, one Oregon county began handing out marriage licenses to same-sex couples. A judge stopped that, and voters passed the ban months later. April 15th may be less dreadful this year. The IRS making it easier for taxpayers to get a 6-month filing extension. But don't put Uncle Sam's money in a new pool just yet. The money will still be due mid-April. You'll just get more time to fill out the paperwork. Thanks for that. Stocks inch up to end the week. The Dow up 8, the NASDAQ up 9, the S&P up a fraction. Coming up in a half hour on the Fox Report, we'll go over to Argentina and ask the question, why is the president over there with all this fire going on? And we'll take you to Paris, where the big question is, why can't they stop the fighting in the suburbs?
And now some fresh pickings from the political grapevine. Mayors have to solve a lot of problems, and admittedly, Las Vegas has some unusual ones. But no one can beat Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman for bold ideas. Asked about the problem of graffiti, Goodman said people who deface his state's freeways should be harshly punished, saying, quote, maybe you put them on TV and cut off a thumb. That might be the right thing to do. He also suggested that whippings and canings should make a comeback as a disciplinary means for children. When asked if he was joking, Goodman responded, quote, I'm dead serious, and went on to say, you've got to teach them a lesson. But not without proper procedure, of course. First, he conceded kids would be entitled to a trial. Former President Jimmy Carter criticized his own party yesterday, saying Democrats spend way too much time debating the issue of abortion. Carter said he himself condemns all abortions, saying, quote, I've never been convinced that Jesus Christ would approve of abortions. As for why Democrats lost the last election, Carter said party leaders had failed to connect with deeply religious people in this country. The Vermont Democratic Party slammed Republican Governor Jim Douglas for hiring a Washington lobbying firm with close ties to embattled Congressman Tom DeLay and President Bush, demanding an explanation for what it called a culture of corruption. But the Vermont Democrats got a little ahead of themselves. The Republican governor had hired an entirely different firm, in fact, the same one used by the former Democratic governor of the state. The firm has no ties to either DeLay or Bush, but has worked with many Democrats, including the governors of Pennsylvania, Washington, and Maine. The executive director of Vermont's Democratic Party has since issued a statement acknowledging the mistake and offering an apology. The North Korean government is telling women to ditch the pants. A woman's magazine reports that North Korean females are being encouraged to wear traditional garments to keep alive their cultural traditions. The magazine says adhering to the native Korean dress style is a very important political issue, especially at a time when, quote, the U.S. imperialists are maneuvering to spread the rotten bourgeois lifestyle inside North Korea. Who knew women's pants were such a potent political weapon? People in Russia are celebrating a new national holiday today, one which many of them don't seem to understand. In an effort to promote patriotism and unity in what remains of the former Soviet Empire, Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared today the Day of People's Unity, which is intended to commemorate Moscow's liberation from Polish invaders in 1612. State-run television aired stories explaining the meaning of the holiday. In spite of that, more than half the Russians asked in a poll could not say why they were getting the day off. But no one was complaining. Corporation for Public Broadcasting Chairman Ken Tomlinson took his share of heat for investigating liberal bias in public television. Now he's resigned shortly before a report investigating his actions is made public. Fox News correspondent James Rosen has the details.
So we are to have a new Secretary of State who dreadfully misjudged the terrorist threat leading up to 9/11 and then misled America and the world about the case for invading Iraq.
That was Bill Moyers, the former PBS host, weighing in on Condoleezza Rice. It was just the kind of editorializing that irked Ken Tomlinson, the conservative chairman of the board of directors of PBS's major funding source, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
You can't do a liberal advocacy show unless you also do a conservative advocacy show. It's common sense.
So Tomlinson set out to quote-unquote balance the political content on public TV by hiring hand-picked consultants to monitor it. But after a 6-month investigation, a sealed report by CPB's Inspector General, Kenneth Combs, has found Tomlinson failed to follow proper board procedures. And after 3 days of closed-door board meetings, Tomlinson, having already resigned as chairman, on Thursday left the board altogether. Known also for its children's programming, PBS has long been a theater for battles over political bias and funding. Some Democrats have joined forces with popular fictional characters to criticize Republicans for alleged attempts to gut the network.
We need someone who replaces Ken Tomlinson, who respects PBS, who wants to advocate for PBS and not undermine PBS.
In a statement, the CPB board said it does not believe that Mr. Tomlinson acted maliciously or with any intent to harm CPB or public broadcasting, and it added that Tomlinson himself strongly disputes the findings in the soon-to-be-released Inspector General's report. Congressman Mike Pence, a former broadcaster who is now chairman of the House GOP study group, told Fox News Tomlinson did the right thing by leaving, but also waged a just war over bias in public television programming.
And I applaud Mr. Tomlinson's legitimate efforts to bring objectivity to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is an institution that receives hundreds of millions of dollars in American taxpayer resources, and its news and content programming should reflect the broadest array of opinion in America.
Tomlinson's allies at CPB say they will use the Inspector General's report to advance the cause that Tomlinson took up. But they say they will be, quote, smarter in how they go about it. In Washington, James Rosen, Fox News.
Next on Special Report, the Fox All-Stars weigh in on riots and Rove during the president's trip to Argentina.
The financial world is filled with difficult decisions. Who inspires confidence? Where can you turn? Ask your financial advisor about the Hartford Mutual Funds, offered by the Hartford, a company built on 194 years of trust. Request a complete prospectus with investment objectives, risks, fees, expenses, and other information to read and consider carefully before investing or sending money.
Good boy. Get the Bulldog of Shredders. Protects more homes and businesses worldwide. Fellows, the world's toughest shredders. And now Fellows introduces SafeSense technology. Automatically shuts off when hands are too close. Good boy.
Wherever hope is the only thing left. Wherever lives can be turned right side up. Wherever natural disasters call for acts of God, that is where your donations to the Salvation Army go. Help those who have been affected by Hurricane Katrina. Donate today at 1-800-SAL-ARMY or salvationarmyusa.org.
So we need 90 notebooks, Wi-Fi enabled ASAP?
Right.
You just want me to make them appear now? All right. Kazi, Kazo, Acho! I'm just kidding. I'll call CDW. You'll have your notebooks in no time.
Nobody responds like CDW. With great technology like the ThinkPad X41 tablet PC. It's one of the lightest convertible tablets on the market. CDW, the right technology, right away.
So you guys want me to conjure up some PCs, too?
Lots of Wi-Fi users work in coffee shops, which aren't always the best places to work. Wouldn't it be great to work wherever you wanted instead of only in hotspots? Now you can with Verizon Wireless Broadband Access. Wi-Fi only works in limited locations, while Broadband Access is the nation's largest high-speed wireless broadband network and is expanding coast to coast. Now get unlimited access at a great price, so you won't get stuck in a not-so-hot spot. Verizon Wireless, we never stop working for you.
With more and more ways to communicate, how do you make faster connections, stronger papers, brighter inks, and electronics that are smarter, smaller, more energy efficient, and easier to use? By using the right chemistry. Improving the things we all need is a goal worth talking about, and it's ours. Dow. Living improved daily.
The panel is brought to you by the Dow Chemical Company. Dow. Living improved daily.
It's a serious investigation. And it's an important investigation, but it's not yet over. Again, I think it's important for the American people to know that I understand my job is to set clear goals and deal with the problems we face.
President Bush in Argentina today, while protesters were gearing up outside in the streets, American reporters traveling with the president were asking him how he intends to deal with Rove and Scooter Libby, whether he thinks that he should apologize for their actions, and whether or not he intends, there's someone running and throwing tear gas at the police, and whether or not he intends to fire Karl Rove. The president, oh yes, how about a panel here? Some analytical observations on all that from Fred Barnes, executive editor of the Weekly Standard, Mort Kondracki, executive editor of Roll Call, and the syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer, Fox News contributors all. The president was pretty firm on this today, Fred, did not budge, and said what he's been saying, which is, I can't talk about this.
Well, you know, that's very important that you mentioned that he said what he's been saying. Now, it seemed to me most of the questions asked by the reporters, I just read a transcript. I don't know who the reporters were, but I think probably Senator Durbin or maybe Senator Schumer drafted them for them. I mean, they were straight. They were Democratic talking points, and they're asking the president about these in Argentina, and that's one thing. The other thing is they knew what the president was going to say. They knew he was going to say that the investigation goes on, as it does, maybe not full swing, but it's still there. And so somebody should explain to members of the mainstream media that they are not a part of the political opposition. They're supposed to be reporters. They don't have to echo Democrats.
You're shaking your head.
No, look, these are the obvious questions. If
no,
the
they aren't.
Oh, wait just a second. If the president has a poll rating of 32% on ethics, and if his trust level is down to 40%, there are legitimate questions to be asked about what's happened here, and what do you have to say about this? Now, you don't have to be tendentious about it. You don't have to say, are you going to fire Karl Rove? Although that is in the atmosphere about. I mean, I don't think it should be, but it is, and they're legitimate questions. They're the questions on the plate. So it's not the press's fault. And I think that look, the president at some stage is going to have to deal with this. Now, I hope when he says that the investigation's not over, when it's resolved, whether Karl Rove is or is not indicted, that he will deal with this somehow and make a forceful statement of what he was all about and what he did with intelligence and all that kind of stuff to clear the air.
Well, now, the president's in a difficult spot, Charles, because the trial, number one, Scooter Libby isn't likely to be over until next fall, about a year from now. Right. And the president can't really say anything about Rove or Libby while the investigation remains open and while the trial's going on. So how does he address these things? And we'll talk about the poll numbers here in a minute.
I think what he does is what he did today. He ducks it. You know, you said Clinton wrote the book on that. You say, I didn't have sex with her, and now I'm going to go back and do the business of the American people. That's the script. You change the word sex to whatever it is, lying, deception, whatever. But look, there's also a good political reason. He knows that the way to get out from under this is to not allow the press to define this trial and what is a very narrow set of charges against one person as the issue in the country. You hear the press saying, well, on Monday, the president tried to distract attention from the subject by nominating Supreme Court justice. The subject being, of course, this incident with Libby. Tuesday, it's in an attempt to distract from the subject, He outlines a $7 billion program to attack the bird flu, which could kill 100 million people. You know, that's really a dereliction to distract from the Libya affair by talking about a pandemic. So the press has an interest in inflating this into Watergate. It didn't happen last week, and part of all of this is happening this week is the disappointment and the rebound and the way to remake that as the issue of the day. And the president's the victim of that.
Well, if the president didn't do those things, the press would say the president paralyzed by the problems in his administration.
But look, what the press is going to say is, if he keeps up with this kind of statement, is that he's stonewalling. You know, there is no way to get around this but to deal with it. I mean, it is there. And you know, he does have a problem. He can't prejudice the trial. There are certain things he can't say, and all that kind of stuff. But he certainly can make a statement. I told the truth. The intelligence was wrong. I'm sorry it was wrong. But we didn't, you know, we didn't phony it up, and just be forthcoming about it.
But that's not what he was asked about today, Mort. I agree. Those questions are fine. There's all these questions about Karl Rove. Reporters, look, these questions. You say it's in the air. Who put it in the air? Democrats put it in the air, and some of these establishment fixtures, you know, mouthpieces for the establishment in Washington who don't like the Bush administration or Karl Rove, they put it in the air. It's clear he's not going to answer anything about Karl Rove now, and Charles has pointed out he can't really say anything about Libby, who's now been charged, you know, in this thing where it is a relatively small issue. We know everything Joe Wilson said was wrong, Valerie Plame's husband. We know there's no underlying crime that the special prosecutor has cited, merely perjury. He said it's not going to be about the Iraq War, and I personally don't believe that Karl Rove is going to be indicted. But we know what will happen if he is. He'll be out at the White House. He'll be gone.
Well, at least the president didn't make a 2-hour speech like Venezuelan President Chavez today, so we can be thankful for some things. Next on Special Report, Senate Democrats aren't letting up on the administration over pre-war intelligence. Is this a legitimate debate or a political stunt? We'll ask the All-Stars next.
The panel is brought to you by BP.
What is global warming?
Global warming is real. It's very real.
The ice caps are melting. The glaciers are disappearing.
We're destroying the capability of the planet to heal itself.
So why not give something else a chance? Why not try something radical and extreme and different?
When you're a star like me, things are taken care of. You see? A second bag. Second.
Even my independent insurance agent spoils me.
Ryan, after comparing a number of companies, I recommend Drive Insurance from Progressive. You'll get a policy customized just for you.
How does the other half live?
Actually, I do it for everyone.
To find an agent who'll take care of you, go to driveinsurance.com.
Exclusively from Sharper Image, the Ionic Breeze Silent Air Purifier with Ozone Guard. It not only captures pollen, dust, and dander, it can actually convert smog and ozone into oxygen with no fans, no filters, silently. The Ionic Breeze charges incoming air and contaminants attached to the collection grid. Then the air passes through the new Ozone Guard grill with Premier Catalyst coating that instantly converts a significant portion of smog and ozone into pure oxygen. America's most trusted brand of air purifier, the Ionic Breeze is the only air purifier that's earned seals from both the British Allergy Foundation and the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, because it's been proven to reduce airborne allergens. Order now and get a free $69 bathroom Ionic Breeze to help keep your bathroom fresh and clean. A free 5-year warranty, and you'll even get free shipping.
Call 1-800-889-3552. That's 1-800-889-3552.
The amazing Little Giant ladder is the strongest, safest, most versatile ladder in the world. But it's more than just one ladder. It's actually 24 ladders in one. With the Little Giant ladder system, you can easily work over and around obstacles, comfortably access your roof and rain gutters, quickly hang Christmas lights, clean your windows in no time, replace light bulbs, easily work around trees and shrubs, and even paint those hard-to-reach areas. Just think of what you could accomplish with your Little Giant. You'll save time and money with the unique Little Giant scaffolding feature, and you can safely work over stairs and uneven surfaces. Ordinary ladders just can't compare to the Little Giant ladder system, and it stores in just 4.5 feet of space, so you can easily maneuver the Little Giant through tight spaces and even transport it in your car. Call right now to find out about our limited time special offer. Don't pass this opportunity up. Call 1-800-LADDERS. That's 1-800-LADDERS. That's 1-800-LADDERS.
We went to war based on intelligence. Phase 1 showed how faulty the intelligence was. Phase 2 gets into the critical questions of whether or not the intelligence which was provided, as exaggerated as it was then exaggerated further, distorted.
Senator Carl Levin from Today. We're back with the panel. So almost every day this week, perhaps every day this week, in fact, the Democrats have had a news conference about Phase 2 and the pre-war intelligence, raising the question of whether or not administration officials exaggerated the intelligence in order to sell the war. How legitimate is this debate, Mort?
Well, I think it's worth examining whether there was exaggeration or not, and the Senate Intelligence Committee is endeavoring to find that out. They're trying to assemble all the statements from administration's officials, match it up with the intelligence that
as well as some Democrats
and some Democrats and Republicans, and match it up. And the Democrats claim that no, they've been dragging their feet. You know, it's a little difficult to know exactly who to believe in this in this.
But
story.
ultimately, that
but
doesn't
it's worth
matter.
pointing out. It is worth pointing out that Senator Levin himself, who was a member of the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and presumably saw whatever he wanted in terms of intelligence before this last war, said, "Uh-oh, Saddam Hussein may use chemical and biological weapons against our troops." Now, what was that based on, if not his reading of intelligence that said that we had those,
well,
that he had those.
You raise an
weapons.
interesting point, and I mean the argument here is that Democrats suspect the administration saw something that weakened the intelligence that they didn't see. But as far as the reports on what Saddam had, everyone seems to have believed it. I want to play something for you that Senator Kerry said during the debate over authorizing the use of force.
In the wake of September 11th, who among us can say with any certainty to anybody that the weapons might not be used against our troops or against allies in the region? Who can say that this master of miscalculation will not develop a weapon of mass destruction even greater, a nuclear weapon, then reinvade Kuwait, push the Kurds out, attack Israel?
Who can say?
Yeah, you know, my hunch here is that John Kerry did not do an in-depth analysis of the intelligence. I suspect that Senator Levin actually did, you know, and was misled by what was in the intelligence, because everybody was misled, but John Kerry was probably doing that politically.
Charles?
Look, of course there's always intelligence on one side and the other. You make a judgment on which intelligence is stronger. Everybody, we and the French and the British, everybody look at the same intelligence and made the same judgment, knowing that in 1991, our intelligence on the Iraqi nuclear program was unbelievably wrong in underestimating what Saddam had, as we underestimated what Stalin had and the Chinese had and the Pakistanis had and all that. Our entire history was underestimating nuclear advances. So here was a case where we had a lot of strong evidence about his, of course, the biological and chemicals everybody agreed on. On the nuclear, there was more of a discussion. But in the face of the failures in the past, underestimating, in the face of the catastrophe that would happen if you make a mistake on nukes, of course you would have to come to a conclusion, which is the conclusion everyone came to, that he had them. The Democrats are acting as if all of this happened in Armenia in 1917 secretly. It happened here 2 years ago. They looked at all of that intelligence, and that same night they could hear what the administration was saying about the weapons. It isn't as if all of this is hidden. It was it was all out in the open, and they were watching it as it happened. I never heard a single Democrat at the time saying the statement this afternoon is exaggerated.
Yeah, they never did. That's why I mean, this is purely a political attempt to portray the president as a liar.
But here's the argument Democrats make. They say, look, there was a lot of intelligence. There's one body of things that suggest one thing, and there are other opinions saying, there were dissenting opinions and other information where people saying, that may not be true. We have other evidence. And they're suggesting that that stuff was winnowed out of the process so that you only got the front edge of these things.
But wait a minute, Ward. Okay. I mean, they're claiming that there's all this intelligence out there that they didn't see. Well, how do they know it's there? I mean, look, I think they saw most. Everybody knew, for instance, that the State Department's intelligence division didn't believe, they were the ones that, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't believe that there were a nuclear program was being revitalized in Iraq. They believed on the biological and chemical weapons they did. But and the other thing that's been a dispute are these 16 words, about Saddam trying to get uranium in Africa that Joe Wilson and others claimed was wrong. Well, it turns out to be true. And the other thing that Pat Roberts of the Intelligence Committee has said correctly, the Silberman-Robb Commission, also bipartisan, said the same thing. There was no pressure on CIA agents to,
all right, that's it. Fred used up your time. That's it for the panel, but stay tuned to Special Report to see the latest and most unorthodox effort to combat the avian flu.
Introducing E-Trade Complete. Control your financial world from one page and be free of ATM fees at any machine, any bank nationwide. In other words, be master of your domain. E-Trade Financial. Be extraordinary.
Right now, get a Dell Dimension desktop with an Intel Pentium 4 processor for $499. And other Dell desktops start at $399. It's more than an awesome deal. It's a Dell.
Practicing for this your entire life. The Chrysler Town & Country with Stow & Go seating and storage.
Travelocity presents The Roaming Gnome, denouncer of travel myths. Our first myth, it's hard work to find the best airfare.
Not true of Travelocity. Just search once, and if there's a lower fare at a different airport or on a different date, they'll show you.
Myth number 2, American appliances don't work in Europe.
Oh, grow up. Ah! Am I going to die?
More ways to find the lowest fare. Book with Travelocity, and you'll never roam alone.
Commitment. Innovation. Winning attitude. Urgency. Quality, standards to live by. Joseph A. Bank Clothiers, the definition of classic. No other clothing comes even close. Joseph A. Bank.
Yeah, I've got Vonage. It's great. I get my voicemail messages forwarded to my email, call waiting, three-way calling. None of that stuff cost me extra. Plus, I could use the phone I already had and keep my old number. Not bad for $24.99 a month. Hey, Don.
We're not out to change the world, just the way you talk to it. Sign up now and get your first month free. Call 1-888-258-4VON. High-speed internet connection required.
Saturday, the President's Pick, the pre-war intelligence probe, plus inside the Senate's secret meeting. We break down the battles shaking up Capitol Hill. At 6, it's the Beltway Boys. Then at 6:30, don't miss Fox News Watch. This weekend, War on the Floor. We expose the battles breaking down the Senate. John McCain and Charles Schumer weigh in. Plus, it's a look inside CBS and his new book. Chris sits down with his father, Mike Wallace, on the next edition of Fox News Sunday.
Finally tonight on Special Report, earlier this week, the president highlighted the possible dangers of an avian flu outbreak. Some fear that it may put a damper on holiday traditions, but at least one company is making sure you won't be scared away from enjoying a particular Thanksgiving Day dish.
I tell you, this bird flu is even having an effect on Thanksgiving. Like, you see what the folks at Stovetop are doing here? I saw it in the store today. This is Stovetop dressing. See, can you see it? Now with Tamiflu. See that?
And the lines for flu shots as well. That's all for Special Report, but stay tuned to Fox for news fair and balanced as always.